This episode, Roofing Basics. The Handyman pros discuss roofing basics, what a roof does, things you need to consider, and some tips and tricks for maintenance. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help you save time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled Roofing the Basics. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what's been going on this week?
Hey, well, this week, welcome to this week. You know,
welcome to this week.
A lot of good things going on this week, isn't there? Larry, I was just I have a one of the gutters right over the top of like where my deck is, and this portico thing I have on the side of the house is that there was a gutter on the very end of the gutter. You know, the cap that's on the end of the gutter.
Yes.
Where they usually seal it up. Well, it leaks.
Keyword being usually. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Keyword. And, so every time you walk from the deck into the portico, if it was raining or not even raining, but, the gutter would have a little bit of residual water in it there, and it would leak. So, you're walking under and you get, hit with some drops of water going in there every once in a while. So I said, well, finally, I'm going to get up there and I got these gutter guards on the top, and I had to take those off, and I resealed it all up and everything. But while I was up there, I was just taking a look at how my shingles were. Now I had my house done. I think I must be going on maybe 10 years now, maybe a little longer actually, and they are just doing great. Down here with the hot sun, it takes a roof will take a beating.
Sure.
And I'm just looking, and they're still soft. They're not all brittle and everything. But anyways, it kind of leads into
it leads into what I was doing this week. So I was up on the roof, actually blowing off the pine straw off my roof and doing the inspection while I was up there too. So both of us this week were busy doing roofing issues. And actually, I think when we were talking, we were just talking. John and I talk every day, and so we were talking about what are we going to do for a show. Let's do a basic roofing show, just because we don't know how much y'all know out there about roofs, but we know enough to be dangerous. And eventually, we'll get a roofer on here to talk about a lot of things. But like we did a siding show that was just the basics of siding. That's in our archives if you would like to listen to that. But we decided we'd do just a basic show on roofing. So with that, John, what is the actual purpose of a roof?
Well,
pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, pretty obvious. It doesn't rain on you, right? So
to keep the water out. That's right.
It's pretty tough to have a big screen television when you don't have a roof. And, you're sitting there on your couch and it's just wide open. But
that's called the patio.
You gotta have something. And it really is an engineered piece of equipment, if you will. That's quite interesting and how to make it perform. And like you said, we'll get some roofers on here. Some professionals that have some companies and tell us, in detail about some things that I think is very interesting that we're not going to talk about in this show. But it really is an interesting part of your house, and it does take a beating.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it.
And like so many things in your homes, folks, this product, if you want to call it, or this portion of your home, is much more complicated than you think. Most people look at the roof and they go, "Oh, it's a roof." Yeah, and you can look at it that way, but we meaning John and I and contractors in general look at it as a very, very different thing. It really is. Believe it or not, it is an engineered. It's an engineered facility or part of your facility. There's really quite a bit to it. So with that, we want you to understand. So John, let's tell them what's the basic construction of a roof, right? Like, I mean, if when they're building a home, what is the construction type in a roof?
So the easiest way to look at this really is that if you imagine yourself and you get up in your attic and you look straight up, you can see the bones of your roof, right? You've got the rafters.
Yep.
Yeah, right. You've got the rafters. You can see the way it's cut. in. We'll talk about all this another time, the details of all this, but you see how it's all cut in with the beams and all those kind of things, and the pitch on it and everything. But, right above that, right, now comes the sheeting that they put on top of all that. So that's just, some plywood or OBX or whatever, right, that they put on the top of that. And then they have to put other layers on top of that to protect it. And finally you get to, your shingles.
Right.
And there's a variety of those out there. But I think that's the easiest way if I was to tell somebody, exactly what, if you get up inside your roof, just or in your attic, just take a look at how that's designed underneath there. And you'll see all the pieces and parts that are part of the roof. And it has to be done, and I will tell you this, it has to be done right.
Correct.
So what you just said, Larry, was that it's not as easy as it looks. And, when next time you go by somebody's home, it's like, no, that's just not an easy thing. That's just not a roof.
Right.
It has to be done right, or you're going to run into a lot of issues.
Problems. And I'm going to describe it. I'm going to give a verbal description in a different way. If you took a saw and you were to cut a section of your roof out, right, and actually remove it, this is how I'm going to describe it. So I'm going to describe. You described it from the bottom up. I'm going to describe it from the top down. So from the top down, the thing that you see is you see shingles, or you see a metal roof, or you see slate, or you see tile. But anyway, it's the exterior covering, right? So it is the very outside edge of the roof. Underneath that, a roof is a layered structure, right, John? That's what you just said, and it is a layered structure. So I'm going from the outside in, or the top down, if you want to call it that way. So you have shingles or slate or tile or metal or whatever. Underneath that, there's usually some sort of an underlayment. Is that correct? There's different types, and we're not going to get into it, but generally we're just going to say it's a tar paper type product, right? It's actually semi-water impermeable itself. So the shingles are impermeable. The or the covering, I should say. I shouldn't say shingles. No, it's not shingles, but we'll get into that in a minute. Then you have an underlayment under that is also impermeable as well, and it's usually made of something that's somewhat kind of flexible, I guess I want to say. So it's usually like a tar paper, or there's some really good poly products that are out there, and again, we're not going to get into big details. Underneath that is some sort of sheeting, right? And it can be, depending on the age of the house, and John said it can be plywood or OBX, and on really old houses, it's actually planks, right? So when you get into old houses, it's wooden planks. Now, they don't do that today because you can't afford to put wooden planks up there, but there's wooden planks. I just did a house that actually had wooden planks for the ceiling, or for the substructure. That house built in 43. Anyway, and then under that is the actual structure. So there's rafters and there's trusses and things, and that's the actual superstructure of the home that sits up on top of your house. Now, over on the edges, right, so where your roof meets things, such as your chimney or any vents that come through your roof, things like that, there's what they call flashing. And flashing is, generally it's metal. It's designed to keep the water out of the roof, okay, where there's a hole coming up through the roof, or an edge. So you're up against a chimney or something, there's an edge. That's called flashing. And then you have a drainage. Usually there's some kind of drainage system that's featured on a roof. It can be gutters. It can be what they call hips and valleys, which are the where there's a change in the roof angle and stuff like that. And so those are the base components of a roof. So when you listen to roofers talk, that's what you'll hear. They'll talk about all that thing. But just understand, it's basically a layered system, and there's a whole bunch of technologies. Believe it or not, there's actual real technologies that go into making a roof and to making it effectively waterproof in that roofing system. So I hope you kind of get a better idea. Both John and I gave two different descriptions, but it's the same. It ends up being the same thing, and I think it hopefully we're spinning a good picture in your head. John, what are the different types of roofing that are available, right? So we've touched on them mostly already, but what's the most common, I guess?
The most common that you're always going to see, we're usually going to see, is asphalt shingles.
Yep.
Those are, either the 3-tab ones, they're just the straight ones, or the architectural ones, and they come in a variety of quality.
Yes.
And not to go off on a tangent here, but when you're replacing your roof, these are the kind of things that you need to consider.
Right.
Because this is a major investment in your home to have a new roof put on. and you might as well get it done right if you're going to stay there.
Yeah, and it's the first line of defense,
right,
right? It's the first line of defense against water.
It is, and you're going to be very happy when it's done right. And I'm not going to go down all those, that kind of thing, but just know that there are all kinds of different types of asphalt shingles and quality of those things.
Right.
So that's one.
Average life expectancy on an asphalt roof?
Well, so
again, I know it depends on the quality.
And that depends upon the quality. Yep. The lousy grade. Let's just call it, your first type of shingles might last, 15 years maybe.
Yeah. If you walk into Home Depot, what do they offer up? Let's just give it or any big box store, I should say. I really shouldn't use one particular brand, but you walk into the big box store, what are they? They're like 25-year roofs is their base level, right? That's
about right. Most of them now are in that in that price, or in that range.
Right.
And you can go higher than that. It all depends upon, the quality of the materials and the thickness of the roof, and
thickness and composition and so forth and so on.
Yeah. So
in general, right, an asphalt roof will last 25 to about 50 years, I think, is the longest one.
That's probably about right.
Yeah. And with that, you're going to pay more for that 50-year roof, right? We want to just give people an idea of cost and time value of money and all that kind of stuff. So that covers the most common one, which is asphalt shingles. What's another type of roof, John?
Well, I lived in Florida.
Yep.
And everybody down there is very familiar with, and probably out in California and in the Southwest is tile, barrel tile.
It's called barrel tile, and it is made of what?
It's like a potted plant, right, on its side. If you think of it that way, for people who don't know what that is, but it's the classic type of southwestern, real southern type of a roof in the hot dry climates or hot wet climates. But those can be fun too.
Yeah, and to give perspective, are they more expensive or less expensive than asphalt shingles?
Well, they're probably more expensive.
Yeah, they're more expensive.
And it's kind of an art to put those on. Definitely. And do it right.
Yep.
And if you have an issue with them, it's also an art to repair them.
Right.
So when we get a roof around to talk with us, I've got a lot of questions that can present so that the listeners can, the audience can kind of catch up with it. But there's a lot of tips, there's a lot of tricks to this stuff, and like you said earlier, all this stuff is very engineered, and
it really is. Yeah.
And you really do appreciate that a roof isn't just a roof.
Right.
So
it's not just just shingles, right?
So that's the tile.
What about metal?
So metal is becoming usually that was a very very popular on barns and things like that, and now it's very popular at least around my area here for very upscale homes and even some smaller homes, but these big homes that are going up around here are getting metal roofs. Now, there's a lot of different variety to the metal.
Tons.
There's very cheap, there's very inexpensive type, and then there's very expensive type with they actually have to seam them when they're on the roof.
Right.
So they look great. No doubt about it, and they last a long time.
Yeah. I think one of the things we forgot to mention is asphalt shingles are the most common because they're generally the least expensive. But they do have we didn't talk about the faults. What's some of the faults on just asphalt are like what, John? Like puncture? Are they puncture resistant?
Well, like puncture resistant, like if you shoot an arrow in the air or something.
Well, or a tree branch comes off,
Yeah, tree branch. You're gonna have issues on any of these things if that happens. What I've experienced with asphalt is that that the sun's a killer on them.
Yep.
And they'll start to peel. They'll start to curl up. They'll get hard. They'll also they get mold and algae on them, and then you get those black streaks on there, which you can remove. Yep. And we did a little tip on how to do that.
Yep.
And there's companies out there that specifically do these kind of things, and it works. And there's other tricks to stopping that, but everything has a kind of the downside to it. But the asphalt has a grit on top of it, and that grit is there for reasons. And after a while, some of that grit comes off. It's into your gutters.
Yep.
Yeah. But
asphalt just and where I'm going with this is asphalt is a little more subject to damage from things like big like walnuts and things can damage your asphalt roof, where a metal roof and a walnut won't. It might dent it, but it won't damage it. There's just some different. There's different when we talk about all these different types of roofs. There's reasons to put them on and reasons that you don't not necessarily think about. But impact resistance is not a hallmark of an asphalt roof. It is of a metal, tile, slate, and some of the other things. These are harder surfaces, I guess I want to say. And we didn't talk about slate, but slate is what they put on for like castles and things in the old days. You can put, and you still can get it. It's extremely expensive.
Yeah, it is.
But it's a 500-year roof is what they'll tell you. It's a 500-year roof. Some of the other things are like wind resistance, right? So we'll talk a bit about the enemies of roofs, but let's just get through. So we talked metal, so you can do metal, and you all know what a metal. You've seen metal roofs, but if you've not seen slate roofs, look at some of the really, really, really old buildings will have slate roofs. And then there's other things too, like we don't see it much here, but you go to Hawaii and there's thatched roofs, right, where they actually just take palm fronds and they thatch them. So that's not really like modern, and then there's sticks and all that stuff, but that's all kind of old stuff, really old stuff, not current. Enemies, John. Let's talk about enemies. And we already talked about one, and that's the sun, right? So the sunshine.
Sun. Like just to recap, but that it gets really hot up there.
Yep.
If you ever been in your attic in the summer, you'll know that roof on top is really taking it from both sides.
Sure enough.
So that's a killer. I mean, all the elements out there. You talk about hailstorms. You talk about
all the elements.
The rain,
wind, snow and ice is a biggie. If you live in cold weather land, snow and ice is huge.
I will tell you that's another thing. Let me pause here a second and discuss. The wind. Some of the cheaper shingles out there, and if they're not put on right, boy, they'll lift off in a high wind.
Yep. And
you got issues then. I remember that our house had some shingles that were really starting to go. Every time there was a big wind, not my old house in Chicago, that boy, we'd find pieces of shingle all over the backyard the next day. So you were forever fixing that. So that's just one other thing that you have to be really abreast of when you get a roof.
Right.
Not so much down here, but all you folks out there that live in cold climates, the snow and ice.
Ooh, it's rough.
I mean, if that roof, and I'm not talking just about the asphalt, but if it's not designed right for that, you can get a lot of weight from snow on the roof.
Yeah, and it'll cause roof failure
if
it's not
cause
designed.
A lot of damage,
roof. Yeah.
And also, if things aren't done right, we used to get ice dams.
Yep.
And that's a whole nother subject of, the way the water was melting off the roof and the insulation wasn't good in the attic, and it would just start to creep up underneath the roof and start to create an ice event underneath the roof and just start to rot stuff away, and moisture and all the way back. It can be a real mess. So there's a lot of things to consider in there.
Condensation is another one. That's a roof enemy. We already talked about moss and algae, and we actually did that quick tip on how to get rid of moss and get the gunk off your roof, basically. Trees and leaves, and like I said, you think trees and leaves, and your immediate thought is, a branch falls off and punches a hole through a roof. And yes, that's true, but at the same time, so what I was doing this week was I just got up on my roof, right, and took my blower, and we have a lot of pine trees around the house, and we got pine straw up there, and it's a lot of pine straw. So, folks, if you're not familiar with pine straw, that's the needles and so forth and so on. But pine straw, any kind of debris that's up on your roof actually causes a place, if it collects, right, so it can be leaves, it can be any debris, but mostly it can be leaves or pine straw or anything in it, and if it catches in your roof, it creates a wet spot because the water gets in it and it doesn't get out, right? And the moisture is what the problem is. So every once in a while you got to get your roof cleaned off. Now, I have a relatively flat roof. It's relatively flat. It's not super steeply pitched. If you have a really steep pitched roof, you generally don't have those kinds of problems, but you still can. So trees and leaves, and then John just mentioned, missing and torn shingles are definitely an enemy. Just deterioration. So shingles don't last forever. Nothing lasts forever. And the other thing is your flashing also. So again, the flashing is generally metal. It's usually aluminum. It's over in the corners. It's around things like chimneys and stuff like that. And around like the flashing around any vents that come up through the roof. And that's usually where you'll get leaks. I mean, if you think about it, where do you get leaks in your roof, John? You get leaks where there are?
Well,
holes, right? Like holes in the roof.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And I will tell you that from the homeowner perspective of if you're going to go up in your attic, and you should look around in there to see if there's any wet spots, there's any dark staining or anything. Just take a flashlight and go around in there, and especially look around where the chimney goes through the roof. Where your plumbing vents go through the roof, because they have these rubber boots around them, and that rubber will deteriorate after a while, and these things are notorious for leaking, and it'll come right around those vent pipes, right down into the house.
Right down, all the way down, as far down as it can go.
Down, wherever it wants to go.
Yeah,
it's everywhere.
And so these are the maintenance tips, right? These are things that you can go out and do that you can kind of fix. And so I just want to reiterate what you just said. If you have access to your attic, right, get in there with a flashlight and just shine it around, right? And John, you're looking for wet spots, but also you said something else there that was discoloration, right? Because when it's dark in color, it's not supposed to be dark in color. General rule of thumb.
And also that if you do have have a roof that you're not afraid to get up on, if you have to replace those boots around the vent, it's not that bad. I'm not going to do it anymore, but you can go down to the big box stores and buy the new boots for those kind of things, and they just slide over the top. Of the vent. You'll be amazed at what kind of hole that they cut in your roof to put that vent pipe through. It's pretty big.
It's amazing. Yeah, it actually really is amazing. And you can see that from the underside usually. You can see how big a hole they cut.
That's right. But it's even more scary, when you think about it, if you're not used to it, when you take the boot off the vent on the top of the roof and you go, oh, man, that's a big square hole.
It's a big hole, yeah.
So, anyways, these are kind of things that are very doable and easy to do.
Right.
You can look up all the details on that, but Larry, you and I have come across a lot of nail pops and things like that in the roof where the nails will either get condensation on them from the inside where it's not vented properly. There's not enough airflow in the attic,
right?
And then you get a cold event. And the air doesn't move around, and pretty soon it's collecting on the nails, and now you've got condensation dripping up in your attic off the nails that are coming through the sheeting. But also, if the nails pop, and it doesn't take much, right?
No, it's amazing actually how little it takes. And folks, when we talk about a nail pop, so I just want to be clear. I want people to understand what we're talking about. Houses move. We've talked about that before, but houses all move, and nails actually will, over time, it takes a long time, they will actually start backing out, right? So you all know what a nail pop is in drywall. If you don't know what a nail pop is in drywall, go into a 20-year-old house and look down the wall, and where you see a little dimple, that's a nail pop. That's where the nail starts moving out. Same thing happens on your roof, and sometimes those nails will actually effectively drill a hole right through the shingle, right, John?
Yes, and I will also add that I'm really glad that I spent the money for gutter guards
Yes.
And I bought the top-of-the-line gutter guards, by the way, which cost me a lot of money. But, living where I live with all the trees and, like you said, the pine straw and things like that, I was getting my gutters cleaned out every year or twice a year. And that means, people are walking around on the roof. Now, to me, nothing good comes from that.
Right.
As you bounce those nails back and forth,
right.
and, on there. So I have so far been, pleasantly surprised that I don't have any nail pops, and I've looked last time I was up there chasing squirrels around the attic.
I was going to say one of the other enemies of the roof that we both have had experience with in the recently, and I think we did a show on it, I can't remember, but is our buddies, Chip and Dale and Mr. Squirrel. They will chew on your roof.
Yeah, well, it's incredible what attacks your roof, but. So, the point being is that, yes, those nails will start to back out.
Right.
And you just have to be you kind of have to be really vigilant, though, with your roof. You should go up there like every 6 months or, whenever you go, if you have a unit or something like I do up in the attic, I go up there and I just flash the light around just to see what's going on up.
Yeah.
Just to look what's going on up here.
Go up sometime when it's actually raining. And just and take a look, and you'll be amazed. I went into a house one time, and I'll never forget it. I get up. I was actually running wire, and it happened to be raining that day, and I'm running wire out in the attic, And I turned my flashlight around. I actually got hit in the head with a drop of water, right? And I'm like, what the? I'm like, WTF, right? I turned the flashlight around, and there is, coming out of a single nail, there is a small stream of water that is running down the joist, and it never made it down to the ground, but the whole joist was soaking wet.
Yeah, I had that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so, unless you're up in the attic and you're checking that out, you may never see that. If you don't do it on a regular basis, you may never see that until it's too late, when the wood has started to rot away. And all that usually takes for a repair, it's a very simple repair. You go up and you just take a little roofing tar and you dab it around the nail pot, where the nail is, and try to push the nail back down, by the way. Just take a hammer and just tap it down. But cover it with roofing tar. Problem solved, no more leak. But if you just ignore it, what happens is we talk about wood rot all the time, but the water gets wet, it never dries out, and the next thing you know, you've got rot.
You got some
big
issues.
Expense.
You got some issues going on.
So
that's really, from that perspective, I want to, from this show, I just wanted to say, hey, when you, a little bit about, what you're looking at when you look at a roof,
right,
and what kind of things you should be looking out for. Make sure that that's draining off into the gutters. Make sure your gutters are good. Make sure that's the whole thing we talked about before of drainage and all those kind of things. But it's quite the engineered system. The roof is. So.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing actually. It's actually really very, very amazing. So I was actually out in the yard the other day, and it started to rain, and I went over and I saw this thing, so I ran over and I ran underneath it because it started to rain. Then I looked up and I realized it was a spaceship. Did you see that spaceship, John?
Yeah, it landed on my roof.
And with that, we will say, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. Go to our website at handymanprosradioshow.com and leave us a message. You can join our Facebook group at Handyman Pros or at Handyman Radio on Twitter. Either way, all the way, we'd like to hear from you, and we will see you all next week. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.